Welcome to Under the Hood, the Faculty Position Series. May these tips propel you along your journey. Hi everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of the Faculty Position Series. This part will talk about the best practices for the written application. In my lifetime, I have completed 5 faculty applications. 4 of them were for research positions, and 1 was for a small liberal arts college with more of a teaching focus. 2 of the 5 of these applications resulted in offers. So I have well-rounded experience with the successes and failures when it comes to applying for a faculty position. So now I'll talk about the best practices for putting together the 6 common requirements for your faculty application. Those requirements are generally a research statement, a teaching statement, a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, a cover letter, your references, and the curriculum vitae. And I'll go through each of these in detail. Now, while every part of your application is important, I would say the research statement is probably one of the more important components of your faculty application. Okay? So, in general, if you are applying for a tenure track research position as someone who is a graduate student coming straight out of grad school, or you are a postdoc with 1 to X years of experience, you should generally have a 6 to 10 page research statement. Okay, and this does not include references. And I would lean toward the lower end for graduate students who are just getting out of graduate school. You may have even a 3 to 4 page research statement. Okay, and so now I'm going to talk about the components that I think would be helpful for you organizing your research statement. So you should have a section on future research, meaning the research that you plan to conduct as a faculty member in that department, okay? So I always recommend that people have 3 projects in mind that they will also present if they are given the opportunity to give an on-site interview. So for these 3 projects, you should present them as you would an abstract. You should have the motivation for the work, any hypotheses that you have for the work, and instead of having your results, you'd have expected results. And instead of your discussion and conclusion, you'd have the expected significance of the work, okay? If you have any preliminary data associated with this new project idea, then you should include that and explain how you've started this work and how you plan to expand this work upon joining the faculty at this department. Further, you should indicate if you've identified any relevant funding opportunities to support this research, or even if you have already applied as someone with PI by exception status, meaning you're a postdoc and you got permission from your institution to lead grant submissions. So you can actually write this into any future project description saying that, hey, if I get hired, this is the funding opportunity that will support this work. This is why the work is important, and this is how the work will be synergistic to department goals. And that leads me to my next point about department and campus synergies. So once you've laid out your plan for future research as a member of that department, you're going to want to talk about the synergies that exist or that would exist with your lab and other people on campus. So you should identify who that partner is and perhaps a paper or an idea or two where your research efforts and that person's intersect. So always, and this is the part of the application that I say takes time, it takes intention, because you're going to be researching existing faculty's websites to determine what these synergies are going to be. The next section you should have in your research statement are your current and past research projects. Okay, so if you're a postdoctoral researcher and you have postdoctoral research experience, you can have a section for that work, especially if it is significantly different from your graduate work. Then after that, you can talk about your graduate research. Now, in all of these descriptions, you should use in-text citations. So you should have a reference list at the end of your research statement. Now, finally, at the end of your research statement, I recommend having a section about your grant writing experience. So part of being a faculty member obviously is maintaining a sustainable research program. Sustainability implies longevity of your ideas and also consistency in raising grants for your group. So you may highlight the grants that you've submitted if you've submitted them, okay? So in each one of these descriptions, you may just want to have a bullet or a table, list of grants, and that list should include the title of the project or the title of the proposal, and you can actually leave this off if the idea is embargoed or if it needs to be kept under wraps. You can simply just list the sponsoring organization, such as the National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, a private organization. You want to specify the project period so that you can let the committee know if the work will be a 2-year project or a 3-year project, because then they will know that the work that you plan to support will last you within the first 2 to 3 years as a professor. Also indicate the funding amount and the outcome. And so outcome could be funded or not funded, pending, awarded, etc. So this section really just gives your committee an idea of how mature your grant writing experience is. And that wraps it up for the research statement. The next document is your teaching statement. Now, as a person that just graduated from your PhD program, or you're about to graduate, or you're a postdoctoral scholar with little teaching experience, this document will be about 1 to 2 pages long, particularly for a research position. Obviously, your teaching statement is a little bit longer if you are applying for a teaching job. So these are the sections I recommend putting in your teaching statement. Section 1, pedagogy. So essentially, give the committee a description of your teaching style and your mentoring style. So mentoring, meaning how you plan to train your graduate students, engage with them, create an inclusive environment, support innovative research, is a part of mentoring and teaching. Okay, so give us an overview of what's important to you when it comes to teaching, lessons that you plan to impart on your students, and how you like to promote inclusivity in your courses and in your research group. So hit on inclusivity and perhaps diversity and inclusion as well. So the next thing you're going to want to hit on is course organization. So how do you manage your time? How do you manage course preparation? How do you manage assignments and midterms and things of that nature? The next thing I'll recommend in this section are a description of your TA experiences and any courses that you may have helped to develop as a grad student and as a postdoctoral scholar. The next section you're going to want to include in your teaching statement is roughly about the courses that you'd be willing to teach in the department that you're applying to. So this is where you're going to do that institution-specific research. You're going to want to go to the department's catalog and look at the courses, read the description, and determine based on your experience about 5 to 10 courses that you think you could be assigned. And this should include a combination of undergraduate level courses, graduate level courses, and even a couple of seminars that you think you might want to take over. Lastly, there should be a section on course development. So if you're given the opportunity, you should let the committee, or if you're given the opportunity to develop a course, these would be the courses that you want to list here. So you don't always have a choice when it comes to your teaching assignment. But if you do, you're going to show here that you have thought about courses that you could potentially add to the department catalog. So you should have a description of one graduate course and one undergraduate course that you would like to add to the catalog. Your graduate course should probably be along the lines of your research expertise. And this really could be a course that sets your students up for success and any students that you hope to recruit. And the undergraduate course that you want to develop could be a slightly less intense version of your graduate course. And one tip that I found that worked for one of my mentees is choosing a course number for your courses that you would want to develop. And so the way you do this is you go to their catalog and you study the numbering system. And if there is a number missing, you could assign that potentially to your new course. And so what that shows is that you've taken a look at the catalog, you've thought about how the courses are organized, and you have some idea about course development. As a tip, usually the higher the number, the higher the student level. So perhaps 300 and below is undergraduate courses, 400 and above are graduate courses. You just need to look at the catalog to determine what's what. So that wraps it up for the teaching statement. The next document is the diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. Okay, so this statement is usually about 1 to 2 pages long. All right, and so what I recommend you do for this statement, because it tends to be the kind of the hardest statement for candidates to write. They've never had to speak about their contributions to DEI. And so if you're given any prompts or any materials that are linked within the job announcement to the DEI criteria for the university, read it. Read all of it. Really immerse yourself in the language of DEI for your institution. There also may be a rubric available for how search committees on campus should evaluate DEI. And so you can search the college website for that information to get an idea of what the search committees look for, because generally it's consistent across departments, and it may be more specific based on the department. So most institutions nowadays have a DEI website for their DEI office, and I recommend you read some of the materials from that website as well to understand the DEI mission of the institution. As a caveat, if diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are important to you and the application that you're applying for does not call for or doesn't ask for a DEI statement, you may want to view that as a signal that DEI may not be a priority for this particular institution. And if you don't want to make those assumptions, like I said in the previous video, you can reach out to the search committee chair and ask about whether or not a DEI statement is required. Now, the do's and don'ts of this statement. Do. So do take it seriously, okay? This is not a one-off. There will be people on your committee that take DEI seriously, and they will be able to tell if you've half-heartedly written this statement, all right? So optional. So if you ever see optional next to the DEI statement, you should consider it not optional, okay? When it comes to putting together materials for a faculty position, submit everything if there is an option to do so, okay? So this is not the time to take the easy way out and skip it, all right? It also doesn't look well if it's a if you're applying to an institution that really cares about DEI and you choose not to submit one, that will indicate that it is not a priority to you. Okay? So do take this step seriously. Now, the big don't for your DEI statement is your identity alone and just showing up as yourself is not a contribution to DEI. Some institutions specifically have in the rubric, identity is not DEI, okay? So to express this in a different way, you could actually say that your experiences and your identity have informed the best practices that you've learned along the way, and that you'll use this information to provide mentorship for other people with your shared identity. So essentially, how does your identity shape your scholarship? How has it shaped the choices you've made for research, teaching, and service? And how will you use those experiences to improve and contribute to the community of the institution that you plan to join? So that's the summary of the DEI statement. Do take it seriously. Do study the materials that are available to you, and put some thought into it. The next document in your application is the cover letter. Now, this is the first document that they may review, so this is also one of the more important components of your application. So in general, you should use letterhead. So if you're at your graduate institution or your postdoctoral institution, you may be able to go online and find the templates, find the logos on the university branding website. Okay? Your cover letter should be no longer than 1 to 2 pages, in my opinion. Okay? My successful applications have had 1-page cover letters. They are succinct, they are to the point, and they have impact with few words. What I recommend as far as sections for your cover letter, okay, are section 1, which should be your overview section. You should tell them who you are, the school that you're affiliated with, the specific interest you have in the position, and why. And this should be extremely tailored, all right? And then you want to end this section with a statement of how you think your research and teaching and service vision will fit into this department. Okay, it's your selling paragraph. All right. So the second section should be a general research overview. All right. You should talk about what you're currently working on, any significant outputs such as papers, research awards, grants, and honors. And you should end this section with a description of your future research direction, your lab's name, the type of research that you're going to be pursuing, whether or not you plan to take a research direction, and how the research, once again, is aligned with the job announcement. In your third section of your cover letter, you should talk about any teaching, service / leadership experience that you have, and briefly talk about your pedagogy and how teaching and mentoring is important to you. And you can give a general overview about the subjects of courses that you might want to teach. You don't have to list specific courses in this section, but you can give them an idea of what type of professor you will be in the classroom. The final section of your cover letter should reiterate your interest in the position, how you plan to follow up with the search committee, and what I often recommend is that you show a little gratitude at the end of your cover letter. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited about this opportunity. Thank you for this, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. So that's a pretty impactful, to the point cover letter, and if you can get this to about 1 to 1.5 pages, I think you should have success. Now, the next part of the application is your list of references. So in some cases, letters of recommendation are not requested until a second round of reviews, and sometimes they're asked up front. Okay? Either way, you may be asked for 2 to 5 letters of references. Generally, the minimum is 3. So this is what I recommend in terms of who you need to ask for letters from in this order of importance. First, your PhD advisor. You should be getting a letter from your PhD advisor, and if you don't get one, it oftentimes raises a little bit of a red flag, okay? Unless there is a decent reason or that you cannot get a letter from your PhD advisor, such as a Title IX issue, your advisor has transitioned prematurely, or they've left academia and no one has heard from them again, then, it makes the search committee wonder why, your relationship isn't in a place where you can request a letter from your PhD advisor. Okay? The second person that you should ask for a letter from is any co-advisor on your work or a member of your dissertation committee. So this is a person that has worked alongside you, and they potentially know quite a bit and can speak to your qualifications to be a professor. The next person I'd ask for is the professor who was the instructor for a course that you TA'd for. This is a good reference, and this person can speak to your teaching abilities. Next, after that, I'd ask any faculty advisor of a student organization that you were a leader of. And then finally, any formal mentor that was paired with you as a graduate student or as a postdoc would also be a appropriate letter writer for your faculty application. So make sure that you reach out to these people and let them know that you're planning to submit an application. If you are on top of things, you should probably request this about 30 days to half a month before the deadline, and send your materials along with your letter request, because as a letter writer, we need to see what we are supporting, okay? And that means they can even give you help with your materials as well. And finally, your application will require a curriculum vitae. This is essentially the long form version of your resume, and it is a career summary. So I think there are different versions of your CV at the graduate level and at the postdoc level. So for graduate students, your CV is probably going to be 3 to 5 pages long if you have not graduated yet and you have no postdoc experience. And so I've listed here the sections that are important for you, and this is the order that I recommend you list them in. So first, you'll give your educational overview, so degrees earned, and in parentheses, if you have not graduated with your PhD, you can put the expected graduation date. Next, follow up with any fellowships and honors that you've received, the funding amount, the sponsoring agency. That's really good to have up front. Next, you can put your publications, if you have any technical reports, book chapters, etc. Then you want to talk about any teaching experience, TA-ships, whether you've developed courses, also any workshops that you've led, any form of instruction that you've given, whether in the classroom or outside of the classroom. Even public teaching is okay. Next, you want to follow up with your conference activity. These are all the presentations that you've given as a graduate student, at technical meetings, at public educational opportunity meetings, etc. And then you'll follow up with your service work, like leadership in student organizations, your technical skills, and any instrumentation and software that you are an expert in. So the next version of the CV I'll talk about is that of a postdoc. And depending on how much experience you have, you could have as little as 4 pages as a postdoc, up to 10 and beyond, depending on if you are more than 3 or 4 years into your postdoc. And the only thing I recommend here is that the difference between that and a grad student, the publication should come right after your education for a postdoc. And then you'll follow up with a section for fellowships and grants. And so grants indicate that you are a PI on external awards that have gone through the traditional grant submission process, and that's a little bit different from a fellowship. Then once again, you're going to follow up with a section called honors and awards. And so an honor would be best paper for this journal, and perhaps an award would be a designation that includes some kind of monetary prize as well. So that's the difference between honors and awards. And then you'll follow with your teaching, conference, service, etc. So at the stage of the written application, the search committee has screened 200 plus applications. So what is going to make your application stand out? Number one, your graduate institution. So they're going to look and see if you graduated from the top 10 programs for your field. Number two, the number and quality of publications as a grad student or as a postdoc. And obviously, the more and the higher impact the journal, the better. Significant outcomes. Did you win any awards associated with your research? Any patents, etc. Finally, they'll look at the competitiveness of your future research program, and how well of a fit that research is for what they're looking for. And so that goes back to part one, where we're evaluating the fit. And this is something that you should determine early on before you submit your application. They're also going to be evaluating the strength of your writing and the maturity. So do you speak and do you write like a future PI? Or is your writing still that of someone who is taking direction from someone that is making the intellectual contributions? So how then do you begin to write like a PI? You take ownership of the work, you use the word I, you talk about the work as if it is your own, okay? And you talk about the work as if it is significant as it is, and how innovative the work is going to be, and how you really think your contributions are going to push the field forward. And finally, the search committee is going to be looking at the strength of your letters, okay? How complementary are the letters? How unique are the comments that are associated with your letters are? And once again, finally, the committee will be looking at fit, all right? Some things that you may not know that the search committee is thinking about that may influence the decision is whether or not they are actually looking for a senior person. So the call may be for any rank, meaning assistant, associate, full, but there could be some internal dialogue about them wanting a more senior individual that you may not be privy to. If it's not specifically stated what rank and they say open rank, there may be some behind the scenes discussion about what rank they actually want. All right, and finally, don't be afraid to ask people that graduated from your department for their materials if they've been successful in getting a position. Most people are happy to share their materials. So this wraps part 2 of the faculty position series. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.